Hello, everyone. My name is Igor Vlasenko, and I'm part of this collective that has this title. I think that is good for kicking off a series of lecture, Attention, Spatial Planning. Also, I think that maybe it makes sense, since we are a collective of planners, that actually the first lecture is on planning, because ideally you start with planning, right? And it's great to be in this space. It's an absolute privilege to be in this exhibition. Many thanks for all the organizers who put it together, who brought a bit of these wonderful activities that are extremely meaningful in the current circumstances and context in Ukraine on display here at ETH in Zurich. We also benefit from this, I think, wonderful atmosphere where we feel ourselves almost like in a living room with these carpets that have very peculiar history. So also, trust me, if you're still sitting on chairs, it's much more cozy to sit on this kind of beige carpets. And since it's a coffee lecture, you're by all means encouraged at any moment to grab a biscuit, make yourself some coffee, don't mind the noise. I think we still hear each other pretty well. And of course, I thank the Ukrainian Association of Students and Academics in Zurich, who basically organized this occasion and who are also making a recording of today's presentation for further dissemination. So thank you for this opportunity. So yeah, without further ado, perhaps I will need to say a few words about how this coffee lecture will be structured besides coffee. So we are going to have a presentation which we'll try to keep under 20 minutes. And you will hear from me and also from other members of the collective. And then we also plan to devote some time to discussion, for which we plan to actually move from this circle that we are having here to the exhibition posters that display our work. And just a teaser for you, for maybe to keep you interested, one of the posters actually displays a project that we are going to start in Ukraine, but which we have not started. So it will be a very early pitch and diagnostics and discussion, maybe how do we enter into this very peculiar context. But anyway, so I have to, I think, introduce the rest of collaborators of the team. We are all part of a bigger initiative, an umbrella initiative called ETH Swiss Network with Ukraine, that involves a number of various working groups of practitioners, of academics, working on various topics related to architecture, planning, urban design, construction, and who currently use their common effort to the great challenge of and tragedy of the war in Ukraine, instigated by Russia. So our group is, as said, is dealing with planning, and I'm happy to have some of collaborators here, Urs, Giler, Nastya, Daniel, and also some faces that you do not see here, including Markus Nolat, Jana Tchaikovska, Natalia Mesak, to our other Ukrainian colleagues, and Kis Christiansen. So our main idea is that as planners, through our professional competence, we would like to introduce some planning practices for the context of rebuilding of Ukraine that we consider innovative and that we consider also collaborative. So the first question is perhaps why in this particular moment of urgency do we need to appeal to innovative planning practices? To me, it can be explained through this number of dualities that the country is going through. And of course, the first duality is the one between the immediate emergency and long-term planning. Because planning activity, planning of space, is something that usually involves a long-term overview, a prognosis, perhaps some model, which cannot really be produced in the circumstances of turbulence that we're going through. Nevertheless, we have to balance this kind of long-term impetus towards also sustainability and this very short-term response embedded into resilience. Another aspect that also produces a duality and challenge for planning is the duality between the projects that are sometimes very situational, that responds to the urgent need, but taken from the planning perspective can appear very fragmented. And on the other hand, we have some big grand meta-narratives at a strategic level. One of the notorious ones that you probably all heard about is Build Back Better. But there is a very big gap between those meta-narratives and those fragmented projects that do not connect the space, that do not they're not translated into certain spatial thinking or a certain spatial form. And then finally, another point of division that we see and we would like to address is the division between an increased consolidation of governance and decision-making in Ukraine, which is quite natural in the context of war with the martial law, special provisions and extraordinary regimes, but also between a very bottom-up, extremely anarchic, very Ukrainian decentralized practices that basically result in many initiatives like ours. So we kind of find ourselves in between these dualities, and we believe that we have found a clue of how spatial planning can address them. And this is something, this is through a model that was developed and tested in various contexts and which we would like to introduce now. And this is called test planning. So first, what's test planning is about? Test planning is as I said before, it's a collaborative process. So what it allows to do, it allows to identify and address directly spatially relevant issues or conflicts through multiple and various forms of agency involving many stakeholders. It is an informal activity, so it does not produce any legally binding results, for instance, towards the land use. However, what we believe is that it produces legitimacy. And legitimacy is an extremely important component of planning that in this case can be facilitated through very participative interplay between design and dialogue. And to me, one of the main benefits of test planning compared to other forms of planning, that it's not just it is collaborative or it involves, let's say, different stakeholders, but it's by definition consensus oriented and non-competitive. It thrives through complexity and plurality of ideas, and it bridges them through dialogue and facilitation. The second one is we believe that this approach is suitable since it was specifically developed to address the context of uncertainty that we are going through now. So it was exactly for the moment where the dynamic context does not perhaps allow to see through this kind of, in this case, quite literally fog of war, but that can help to orient through this more situational and flexible dynamics. Then also in a similar manner, it produces bridges between informal practices and centralized planning. And this is again done by inclusion of different stakeholders that are usually find themselves in different hierarchies of governments, of decision-making, and bringing them into a more horizontal perspective that allows the direct exchange of opinions, ideas, and also approaches. And on a practical level, test planning addresses something that I already mentioned, is discrepancy between, let's say, more grand visions and projects. And in this case, if we apply that to planning, this would be basically the combination of master planning that is supposed to produce comprehensive vision for certain territory, very multifaceted, and infrastructure projects through which actual development or reconstruction or recovery is pursued. So by building these bridges, test planning kind of builds systemic relations between these two scales and help them to bring them into balance. Well, here I am almost ready to hand over to my colleague Urs, and we wanted, of course, to show how test planning works exactly in practice. And for that, we thought that perhaps it would be more inspiring to show not maybe the cases of Switzerland that we also reviewed, but actually the cases of Ukraine. And here we are happy to say that there is like a precedent of quite successful, or at least insightful, application of test planning in the context of Ukraine that has been happening since 2018 in Vinnytsia. So here I hand over to Urs, who was directly involved into the planning, same as Nastya, here to present to you how it actually unfolded. I have to do this intermission for the sake of
I have to
recording.
put this here.
Yeah.
Something like this. Okay. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Yegor. I'm glad to share with you some of the experiences we had in Vinnytsia during this case of a test planning-like procedure. I think it has a lot of elements how we are used to do it in Switzerland during this procedure. Still, it was adapted also in many things. It was adapted to the local possibilities that we had in Vinnytsia with it. Maybe to start, it is probably connected mostly to the last slide of Yegor. It's a connection between infrastructure project and master planning, the development of a specific area in the city. But even though this test planning project didn't appear just from space, from somewhere, from 1 minute, it has quite an interesting background, which is also very much connected already to Switzerland. It was a few years before where Vinnytsia, which had by then quite a progressive mayor, Volodymyr Groysman, who later became Prime Minister of Ukraine, which started again 10 years before this plan came here that we see. He started a lot of transformation and reformation processes in the city, and he got a clear strategy with the aim to make already then. He used the term European city for Vinnytsia, with the important aspect of comfort, all kinds of to make it more comfortable. It was about how citizens from Vinnytsia can achieve municipal services, how they are meted in the city hall when they came, up to then also to the urban space. With this project, maybe I have to say I was working during this time for the city council in Vinnytsia, and it get an opportunity in the framework of cooperation with Switzerland, with SECO, to include it. In fact, it was an energy efficient process, to include the aspect of urban planning in it. And it was this first plan, so-called integrated urban transport and spatial planning strategy for Vinnytsia, which firstly tried to spatialize all the strategic aspects from this paper to the city man, to the urban space. So this is one important background, and probably maybe the even more tangible and also the more famous is this project Zurich Trams for Vinnytsia, which now is in a new phase already, but it started, I think, 2007 were the first. So in Vinnytsia, were the whole Vinnytsia public transport in Vinnytsia is served in fact by trams from Zurich, and during the time when then came the aspect of the Testplanung, there was already in discussion to get the next generation of Zurich trams. So here you see these are the first generation they got, and here you see this is a picture from last year, which are now also during the war are delivered already the newer generation. But to get really the possibility to get, so SECO was asking, so you already have these trams. What do you need new for? And for this also Vinnytsia had to prove their aims to develop public transport in Vinnytsia further, and for this the base was this plan. So there was maybe I go one more back. Actually, you see the project, the test planning was about this area here. The prospect Kotzubinskova, which is identified in this strategy as a key element for improved urban development, but also urban transport, due to the fact that in this part, so this is the railway station, this is city center, and this would be the direct connection between railway station and city center. And in fact, it was also the first tram line which was introduced in Vinnytsia here to the hospital. So this, but in 1979, this piece of tramway was dismantled, and it has quite an interesting also story. One of the reasons was because all the industries were in this area, and it was not so important to connect the railway station with the housing areas. But the fun fact is 1980, the Olympic Games were in Moscow, and the Olympic flame should also be shown in Vinnytsia, and in the advance for this, so really they dismantled this beautiful prospect to have it to give it a more modern image, and since then this connection was missing. So this idea or this aim to get this tramway was already, it was not new, so it was somehow logic. But still there were a lot of doubts, does it really need it? And there are the markets, and there are a lot of interests, really new interests were achieved, and also during the early 2000s, markets, commercial interests, space for parkings and so. And it was very hard to find a way somehow to convince people about also political, especially political, and especially also the local businesses, that this somehow logical infrastructure project really has a dimension for the urban development, and to bring in a lot of interests together. And the format of the test planning was also a way to communicate this idea, this project in a different. So it started immediately with kind also of a branding. It was the Vinnytsia mile, the Win mile, to show that this is really an important part of the city, and to get a lot of stakeholders and actors around a process. So, and it was really, also from the political way, an opportunity not only to investigate the potential for urban planning in it, but also really to discuss some very important projects in another way. What was important, so the organization, this is in Ukrainian, most of you, I see you know Ukrainian. There we have also on the poster, then it is in English. It is not the same, but in fact here it would be more or less the same. So the organization that we had was quite classical. How is it done in Switzerland, in a way, with 3 teams who are develop their proposals with some experts and stakeholder and local actors and stakeholder who are consulting. Then there was a special, but I think Nastya will then explain a bit how her experience was with this. What I think the consulting of these external experts were also, some were from Switzerland, some were Ukrainian. It was much deeper than we know it in Switzerland. But what was very important to be able to provide this test planning was in fact the local capacities that Vinnytsia developed during the last 10 years, I think, more or less, with 2 communal enterprises who were active during this process, the Institute for Urban Development and the Agency for Spatial Development. Spatial, the name says, they are dealing more with the hard parts. The Institute for Urban Development more with the soft part, with stakeholder and citizen engagement and participation process. So they were very, the local resources in the phase of preparation of this project. Yes, and then, how we executed it. Just a few words. Also here, traditional, like it's done in Switzerland, more or less, in 3 phases, with these 3 teams, where Nastya was part of one team. And before I say more, maybe it's more interesting just to hear it from her perspective.
Okay.
Yes, you need this.
Yes. Oh. Now I switch in my role. Yeah. So before I become a curator here, together with my Swiss and Polish partners and a partner from Kosovo too, I worked in Ukraine as an architect in NGO Urban Curators, and we since 2015 we've been doing many projects that all of them were participatory, like either it's mapping or planning project like Studio of Ideas in Vinnytsia. My office was in Kyiv. I lived in Kyiv and I knew how it's difficult for the professional who admires participatory processes and like any project that value process the same as the results to find a job in Kyiv and all around Ukraine, like in most of the cities. And Vinnytsia is a very special case in that, and I think this is one of the reasons why we're suggesting as a group this city for their test planning, because after this very long, what we call like planning practice and Soviet planning practices and post-Soviet planning practices, we are as a community of professionals and also citizens, we are looking for this, how to say, very fruitful ground for the participatory processes, for the test planning as a very crazy hunter. So it's very difficult to find a community where you can do what you believe in, what you can study. And Vinnytsia is, in this case, very special. And I started to work in this city after many years. Urs did his work in this city and with other professionals. So I kind of benefited from his work. And I realized that city administration and communal entities are more ready for the workshop, for the discussion than in other cities. So, and specifically in this case of the studio, we were invited as a collective because we were kind of known as a planners. And we first time in Ukrainian practice, we experienced this non-competitory, way of planning. So we were, since we were invited, we had a contract, so we were paid for this job. So we did not have this idea to get the project and to continue to work because we consider this phase as a very strong commission for us, where we can express the ideas. And yeah, so at the end, at the end of the studios, other team continue implementation. And for us, for the planner, was important that we contributed with the idea and with the processes. For us, like the additional benefit was that we knew people in the city, and we applied for another project. So for us, it was also a very good experience because we've found another opportunity to work in the cities, and we did research. Yeah, I think more or less I feel that I explained this like how to say the very special context of Vinnytsia. Yeah. Thank you. Whom I need to pass this microphone? To you.
To me, yes.
Yeah.
I think, to add to what Nastya said, for Vinnytsia, which is even it's the size of Zurich by inhabitants, it's quite a provincial city, and during many years, mostly local architects, local planners, it was working. It was it was a huge step forward to have this. Three teams actually were from other cities, Kyiv, Lviv, and Ivano-Frankivsk, to have this new, on the one hand, new perspective on the city, on the other hand, also other approaches how to deal with a problem. This was really, kind of in German, a Quantensprung, I think, for Vinnytsia, which then also, I think, Nastya since then again got other activities with Vinnytsia, so it really changed a lot. And I think this was a very important and nice effect for Vinnytsia, for all these processes. They put it also on the map, then also for professionals in other city. This was probably one of the very important results and effects that we had, besides of these 4 proposals, which you see, or each of them has a bit different focus. One team, it was a local team. They had very much on the local feeling. Others, and this was Nastia's teams, which, and you see it in the next slide also, which had more than, from Kyiv. They are used to bigger. They actually dealt with the whole district and showed that this urban area is development of it is really the effects in the on both sides between this and districts. As we also had a team which was dealing really more with the infrastructure and transport part of the project. And so as a result, there were kind of 2 dimensions. One was it helped to define the infrastructure part first. So it got accepted politically better, and it helped to define it, to put it in pieces, because money is a big effect, and it's a long term to identify different parts, which then also could be developed and realized during different times. Partly started, partly now interrupted. So actually this part is not further because and now it's again there are more higher priority projects for Vinnytsia than this tram line because of the war. Yes, but so we really got a useful effect to define the infrastructure part, also together then with international studies for the discussion with international development banks who should inform. And the other part, and here is Nastia's project and approach contributed a lot on it, on the planning of this whole district, which showed the interaction between different kind of projects, not only infrastructure or not only transport infrastructure, public space, also social infrastructure, big housing projects, and so which showed. So this was actually quite interesting compared to, this was kind of the approach showed in 2012 in the strategy, which identified this area as a place for development. And here during this map, then it was more specified and helps now. Some of these are really realized, like, for example, this. It is still very close to the whole. It's one of the transportation parts which is realized. This new this street design, in fact, which was with this boulevard, tram line, bicycle lanes, and so it was the first project in Vinnytsia that was really realized. So from at least from the transport and from all the transport parts in a new way, and brought the different interests in another way together. So this is was named kind of a should have been or could still become the pilot then of the main artery, the example which should evolve. Yes, but so actually test planning helped quite a lot to bring on the path which Vinnytsia was already for 10, 15 years or not, in bigger steps forwards, and concrete this project. Also, this is developed further. This is also one of the results. It showed that this square, it's the Victory Square, which in the middle of the prospect could be also one of the first part who could be realized. It was an architectural competition already was provided, some test events, how then to organize and how it could work with activities with another organization, until unfortunately July 14, 22, where exactly at this place the Russian rocket destroyed the life, killed among 40 peoples, and yeah, and really in the heart of this project, yeah, of this area, now brought in, yeah, again, it's another dimension. Yeah, so it's now, as I said, now recovery aspects are on a higher priority than just urban transformation, which we are used to get. But then also when you come to recovery, what it means probably, yeah, to exactly this area, test planning is maybe not, yeah, not the instrument anymore when you have such tragical events like this. Or maybe it could be still a very fitting instrument. And I think that's an interesting part of the discussion then also. Who should be involved, how the format of test planning can be adapted in different places in Ukraine, in different circumstances. So, yeah. That's it about the Vinnytsia case, and I think I hand over back to Yegor.
Yeah, thank you, Urs. Well, first, as you see, we have tricked you cruelly by saying it will be 20 minutes. But now we would like to offer to have our discussion and maybe Q&A as a little activity. First, if you, yeah. First, as you can see here, we have a lot of questions to ourselves as well. Some of them are displayed here. But anyway, is there perhaps a question on us, our collective, the approach, so test planning thing? Yeah.
No, actually, I have two that are also questions of discussion, of our discussion. So the first is more general question: how long did the test planning process in Vinnytsia last? Because I think it's an important thing to kind of emphasize in this presentation, to understand also the execution phase, then how it went.
Yes, actually, it was a bit faster than in Switzerland. The involvement of the teams was half a year, 6 months, and the preparations were also a bit faster than in Switzerland. But the involvement of the team, so it was really in 2 months steps where we met with them 3 times. It was quite fast, maybe. For you, the 6 months, so the time span of the test planning in Vinnytsia, which I said it was a bit faster than we have in Switzerland, but in Ukraine everything is fast. I think it wasn't a problem for you that it was so fast. So.
Yeah, yeah, I think yeah, we as commonly known that the participatory project is often very slow. Yeah, but in Ukraine, it could be a little bit faster due to their lack of understanding what the participatory means. And if you are like, I carefully say ecological leader, that you understand that people are not really ready to express so many opinions, and you really can provide enough openness, but still like lead. So I think this is like the power that you can lead in Ukraine if you know enough and not use your power like for the not good thing. That gives opportunity to do it more faster. People can trust you if you provide especially arguments, and if you rely on your practice, on your like network. This is something that can make participatory process more like, yeah, going smoother. Yeah, yeah, that's.
I just continue with this question about the realization. So then, I mean, in the test planning process, we know it's not competitive, so there is no winner. So how did it come to an end that one, or I don't know, a combined project then what's realized? And then how also this process after the test planning process went into kind of realization?
This is a very good question, and this is one of the aspects which are very challenging in Ukraine. So, my opinion, yes, even that in Vinnytsia this local resources, and in fact an institution who got the tasks to it, Agency of Spatial Development, and kind of a process was designed. We were not really able to formulate the synthesis in it, and to structure the next steps also then with tasks for different departments, for example, or for so in a way which yeah, for me would have been satisfactory. So I think this is really the so there are certain elements were picked out and developed further, but really it was really due to and the reasons. I think there are two main reasons. One is yeah, lack of experience there in general, and also the capacities to share them with them experience. For example, yeah, I have from outside to provide them with support, and the other part, the lack of human resources in general for it. So that it is still this one of the projects and they had. So I think this is yeah. And the third aspect is probably the main aspect still, the way of planning all the system and how the city is doing and is able and used to do the planning. It's just not in the same way as in Switzerland, to formulate it very, very brief.
Yeah, add one comment, because I think one might ask the question, you know, what is the performance of test planning of this method, and where are the boundaries? You know, so what are the kinds of challenges where you somehow activate this tool, and what are the kinds of situations when you rather not, and what's the relation between the two? And I would like to give a quick insight into that. So first of all, I think test planning is a tool for complex spatial challenges. You know, I mean, Urs showed an example of a missile attack that demolishes a building. You need to rebuild it. You don't need to launch a test planning procedure over a year and a half, because you don't need to problematize. You understand what the task is, and you need to execute it. One aspect of test planning is that you're facing complex spatial challenges where in the beginning you maybe even have to clarify what the real set of problems is. What are you know, or where are the handles where you can tackle these problems? So test planning in that sense is also an analytical tool. It doesn't only give normative visions, but also kind of a better understanding of the situation. Then what I also find interesting is that test planning is also capable to integrate other projects. You know, so if you rebuild the demolished building, this project as such can be integrated into the test planning as one factor. So the test planning procedure considers this as an ongoing process, as an element, as a variable that has an impact on other issues, the larger scope planning tackles. And then the third point, which I find very important, is that through participation, which, and here I would like to emphasize and reiterate what has already been said before, that by participation, we don't mean only the participation of the users of space, but also of stake and stockholders. So the political decision makers, the investors and developers, be those private or public, interest groups that are somehow hold stake in the development, are present at the table. And this has two very important qualities or potentials for the potential success of the whole planning process. One is political legitimacy. So, I mean, you know, the bigger the scope, the bigger the amount, and bigger the diversity of the participants, including political decision makers, the bigger the legitimacy. Because since, as both Yegor and Urs mentioned in their presentation, this is a discursive and consensus-based process. At the end of the day, in the ideal case, everyone stands up from the table supporting a consensual idea. And the second aspect is that the participation and dialogue also endows the normative visions with models for their realization. What do I mean with this? I mean that there is already an idea how the development can be realized. You know, what can the city finance? What is the private investor willing to put into the project? Where are the different know-hows? How can you organize? Whereas in a case of a design competition or planning competition, you basically end the process with a vision, and then the whole thing starts, which is first of all another relatively long time period, and second of all, it can lead to it can somehow send the project to a death row because there is no way to realize it, because those who would be in the position to do so were not part of the planning process. And this is an extremely valuable asset of test planning, besides all the others that have already been mentioned before. Sorry for being long.
I would just like to kind of add another thing on what Daniel is saying, who perfectly, I think, synthesized in a nutshell the definition and the kind of the proper use and proper tool to be used in this context that Ukraine is right now. I think we have also to say that we also know, are aware of the differences that we would have in practicing this tool in Switzerland and one would have in Ukraine. On another hand, we are also aware that this process needs, first of all, time, a little bit longer than one could think of. Then it needs financial sources, very strong political will to start such initiatives, because these initiatives really need some political will to initiate them, because it's a process that needs to include many stakeholders, stockholders, citizens. On the other hand, we also are aware that one also needs the capacities to then execute this kind of processes, and also the awareness of citizens. So I think while we are going to kind of propose this in a pilot project, we are also going to kind of tackle these kind of issues that might come, and how we can then share knowledge beside the tool itself, how can it be done, and all the processes that one has to go through. But take into consideration also these other challenges that are also coming from another context, very different from Switzerland, that has a very long also history and culture of practicing this tool and instrument.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. And we know, we are aware that we are in the end of this lunch hour. So perhaps I suggest that we close the formal part of discussion now. But I think we will stay. I think it is in our interest to stay around the posters and discuss. And if you would like to stay with us and maybe also ask some things a bit more informally, personally, we would really appreciate this. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending this premiere coffee lecture. Thanks again, UASAZ and the organizers of the exhibition. Thanks so much.